Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is our 10th webinar in the Think CX Digital Leaders Tell All series. Today, our two digital leaders will discuss how a new focus on digital experiences is shaping consumer banking. If you have any questions, please ask in the chat area. If we don't have time to address live, we will on through email after the event. I'm eager to hear the trends our two speakers will be sharing today. Let me first introduce our digital experts from Evolv. Evolv is an AI-driven solution for digital growth optimization that serves the best experience to each audience at a time. Our two digital experts, Sam Nazari is the Vice President of Customer Success, where he works closely with Evolv's customers to ensure they have the training, support, and experimentation roadmap to ensure their success. John Trembley is the VP of Marketing at Evolv and has over 25 years of experience defining global marketing strategies, working for companies ranging from startups to Fortune 100s. His experience includes retail, high tech, and telecommunications. Thanks, John and Sam, for joining us, and I will pass it over to you both.
Thanks, Maren.
Thanks very much, Maren. And welcome, everyone. Glad to have you with us. And we just want to kick it off and talk about four major trends that we've seen coming out of 2020 that are shaping the agenda for 2021. We'll get into a couple of surveys and examples and some statistics that we've been able to track and that we feel are important. Trend number one is really that all digital screens matter. And I think more than ever with COVID and a lot of people either working from home or really trying to cut back the amount of travel and in-branch kind of visits that they're doing, it really highlights the importance of all the various screens that you have to work with. So not just your laptop or computer or mobile phone, but the ATM or even the interactive teller machines, if you have some of those, and even the kiosks, whether it's a payment system or even a kiosk that you might be handing somebody if they walk into a branch to submit a form. So really the message here is that all the screens matter. You really need to focus on a consistent experience across all those devices. And you got to think about the journey, because each of those devices really has strengths and weaknesses. And you want to take that into consideration when you're architecting the journey and how you want your customers to use this. So let's get into a little bit of the specifics here. Digital Banking Report did a survey in the November timeframe, and they just put out some really interesting statistics. And in this case, there's a couple of charts that we'll go through. Sam will be covering another aspect of the survey right after this. But their top priorities, and to me, no surprise, right? Digital banking was by far the most important strategic priority through 2021. It goes back to the start of my intro here, talking about all screens matters. You really have to accelerate that transformation and push yourself to do a lot more, probably a lot faster than a lot of banks were intending to do. Right behind that, which it really is to no surprise, is improving customer experience. Those things go hand in hand, right? Digital transformation is going to enable a lot more sophisticated elements to the customer experience and the customer journey. And then you can see some of the rest of it. I mean, obviously the usual cost and risk, but it was very interesting to me that as the pandemic has reshaped the agenda for many companies, including banks, credit unions, and financial services institutions, that it's all about transformation and customer experience. And Sam's going to dig into a couple more aspects of this survey.
Thanks, John. So taking a look at the next slide, what is going to have the most impact on the client experience in 2021? And we look at the top two, native app user experience as well as personalization. And while some of the trends of 2021 are extensions of what we've seen in the past, others are new, caused by the combination of digital, economic, and social changes we've seen in the last 12 months. And there's really three key takeaways here. One is impact based on speed and simplicity, channel uniformity, and design. So when we talk about speed and simplicity, customers no longer base their decisions and experience perceptions solely on offers or promotions or convenience. It's the expectations that are based on the digital speed, simplicity, and making sure that it's contextual. When we talk about channel uniformity being assumed, more than ever, consumers are expecting a consistent experience across all channels and platform in real time. And when we talk about design, consumers make a decision on whether a web or mobile app is right for them immediately based on the design alone. And then the next trend, we all know that the digital experience matters, but I think what we want to highlight here is how impactful it is when you have a poor website or mobile app. And according to, again, the digital banking report that we already referenced, a bad mobile or online experience can significantly damage your brand and potential future engagement and acquisition. For example, 57% of customers won't recommend a business if they have a poor experience on a digital property. And if a website's not mobile friendly, 50% of customers will stop visiting it, even if they like the business.
Yeah, so let's dig more into mobile, because clearly mobile is all important these days, and we've seen, especially in Europe and parts of Africa and parts of Asia, where it's become the de facto device. It's the primary interface, even to do some of the things that you normally do with an ATM. And we've definitely seen some interesting trends with increased fear about touching shared devices, and obviously ATMs have touch screens and buttons and surfaces that aren't going to get sanitized all that often, especially the ones that are outdoors. And so you've seen a real shift to wanting to use the smartphone and the smartphone's keypad as the primary interface. And we've seen some interesting transformations there. The exception is getting cash, right? If you're going to get cash, you actually have to touch the interface. There isn't really a way around that. But a lot of banks have managed to shift a lot of the workflows to really work hand in hand with the smartphone and the ATM. And really the goal that you're seeing is to be able to perform a given transaction, whether you're online, whether you're using a mobile device, whether you're in the branch, whether you're talking to a call center representative live. It doesn't matter. It's all consistent, and that's the key message. Is that as part of this trend, you really have to invest into uniformity and into consistency, and be able to provide an on-brand experience regardless of the channel.
Yep. And another trend that we're seeing is driving the adoption of key capabilities, digital payments, digital wallets, and bill payments. And in the next slide, we reference the Forrester report on merchants' plans to adopt contactless payments. And this, payment leaders have had to shift their priorities to adapt to the realities of the world with COVID-19. So you can see here, a healthy majority adopted third-party digital wallets in 2019 and 2020. And a good chunk are planning to, in the next 18 months plus, adopt contactless payments with third-party wallets. Contactless enabled debit and credit cards are very, very important, especially if those other third-party digital wallet support is not available at merchants, so that, again, to John's point, you're not needing to insert your chip into the chip reader, interact with the pin pad, and use half a bottle of hand sanitizer afterwards. It's just really a poor experience. So you want to make sure that you are making this experience as contactless as possible.
Yeah, exactly. And trend number 3 is all about personalization. And that's something that we've seen a big investment in heading into this year. And perhaps one of the more complicated elements of the journey, and we'll touch on that with the fourth trend when we start to talk about security and compliance. But there are two low-hanging fruits out there: loan shopping and qualified credit card signups. I mean, I for one have for the better part of a decade almost exclusively focused on credit cards that provide lots of travel benefits, which clearly this past year have not been very useful to me. So I went about looking for different credit cards that would offer better incentives that are aligned with my current situation and the way that I live. And I think that's very much a low-hanging fruit, but it has to be personalized. It has to be targeted, and it has to be convenient, especially now that more people are using a mobile phone. You really have to think through, what does that sign up process look like, and how do you make it frictionless? How do you make it as easy as possible? And then more importantly, how do you tailor it based on demographics? Because I think that that's the key. And we've seen quite a bit of emphasis where consumer sentiment is that of almost a GPS. They're really looking for banks to act like a GPS system that's helping them figure out what direction to take, what services they should consider, and then more importantly, what they qualify for. Because there's nothing that's going to damage your customer experience than getting somebody excited about a potential service only to let them know that they don't qualify for a reason or another. So a key element to personalization is having some history of past interactions and leveraging that as you head into it. But again, as Sam's going to get into, you really have to pay attention to the different demographics.
Yeah, and to the point of not all journeys are the same, we can take a look at the typical traits based on the four demographics identified here: baby boomers, Gen X, Gen Y, millennials, and Gen Z, and how they interact with the digital experiences. Obviously, with Gen Z, we see a very healthy mobile first uh, trait where they're constantly shopping online. They are using solutions like Snapchat, et cetera, and they're more likely not to be influenced by brand. Whereas on the millennial side, 83% of millennials, like myself, more likely to make impulse purchases, mostly done on desktop, use heavy users of Facebook. And so what does this tell about personalizing the experience based on demographic, making sure that you have, obviously laid out your mobile and desktop strategy, but really getting into specific user experiences for these different demographics. And I think one that's been impacted heavily, especially with COVID-19, is the baby boomers and some Gen X population that were used to going into the branch to for all of their banking needs, and now are forced to do it online. So making sure that it's not just, when you're thinking about personalization, targeted copy and promotions, et cetera, those are table stakes, but really making sure that the user experience is tailored so that they can get to the action that they want to take when they interact with your digital properties. And one trend that we're seeing, especially with banks in Europe as well as the US, is how do you bring that in-branch experience online, especially for users that are not used to taking actions on digital properties. So what we've started to see is things like banks starting to allow users to connect with the branch associates for their banking needs, and that's a trend that's seen, that was mainly a decision that was made for users that were more traditionally going into branches in person for their banking needs. And that's a completely different experience for a demographic like Gen Z, who is used to doing performing all their banking needs on mobile devices. So when you're looking at solutions for personalizations, developing your strategy, make sure that it does look at the overall user experience, in addition to targeted copy and promotions.
For sure. Yeah. Gen Z is so interesting. I have two of them in my household, and the last thing they want to do is talk to a human being. So It's very interesting having to deal with the different needs and the different expectations that different generations have, and how you can better serve them. And I think one of the points we want to go back to is just how um, how people are really not very sticky, and they're not very loyal, and they'll switch very easily if they perceive that they'll get more of the experience that they're expecting somewhere else, especially Gen Z. They're not sticky at all. So it is an ongoing challenge to continue to tailor your experience to them. Another element of demographics is, especially here in the U.S., but I think it's true increasingly in a lot of the modern world, is immigrants and people who live in the country who may not be native speakers. There's a couple examples of this. Bank of America at the end of last year commissioned some search or some research and primary reports on specifically focus on the Latinx or Hispanic Americans. And then in October, Viva First, which is a mobile only a bank, launched. They seem to be struggling a little bit because they were in an alpha release and they were supposed to be live by the end of Q4, and it still doesn't seem to be running. But it's very interesting to see that specific focused on a particular set of the population. And another example that Sam's gonna talk a little bit about is American Express and their push into Japan, and what they've had to do to really customize the journey and personalize it to more of the Japanese preferences. So let's talk a little bit more about this American Express study. There were a lot of really interesting statistics, and also Viva First, as part of their launch, provided some interesting surveys. So if you look in the US, for instance, 52 million people are Latino or Latino Americans. And what's interesting is, for the most part, they've been kind of underserved by financial services. And that study said that 84% of Hispanic Americans stated that they'd like to learn more. And what's even more damaging is 51% of them feel, somewhat undervalued by the financial services industry. And what we see also, what's beyond those statistics, the two that are on the screen here, was that 50% of the people polled in this particular survey basically stated that only half of them have a checking or saving account. Still a very cash-oriented culture, although a lot of signs are that they want to spend more focus on expanding their financial services capabilities. But that's a pretty stark contrast when you consider that of the non-Hispanics, 72% of them already have an account. So I think that explains why Bank of America and Viva First are really focused on this. Viva First is the most dramatic because it is literally focused 100% on that community. If you look at their Facebook feed, both from a visual, the use of images, the use of copy, it's very geared towards that culture and more of an immersive in language kind of experience. And I think that's a big trend that people need to consider. And the American Express example, I think, is another example of that.
Yeah, and I'm an American Express customer for a very, very long time. But if you look at some of the different markets, specifically in this case Japan, you'll see that the credit card sign up process, the 5-step process, and user experiences is somewhat different than the process in the U.S. So you're seeing different types of messaging in terms of, in this case, 60 seconds to a decision versus in the US, 30 seconds to a decision, very large form fields, cyan background, and different ways of labeling each of those form fields. And you're seeing with the different markets a different experience. So they are segmenting those audiences and finding what most likely seems to work for that particular market based on what they're used to in that market. And I think a really interesting data point here is the Economist Intelligence Unit found that only 15% of banks and insurance companies utilize AI. but almost 90% plan on increasing AI-related investments in fintech over the next 5 years. And when they're asked why, they said AI was unlocking new growth and shrinking costs, and half said that AI would drive new products and open up new markets. So when you're looking at really personalization and optimization in the future, a lot of solutions that leverage AI to help you scale your personalization efforts is recommended to be kind of at the forefront, to, especially if this is something that's new to your business adopting and building a process around.
Yeah, I think, Sam, when we consider everything that we've talked about, the different devices and the different journey and the different demographics and the permutation, the number of variations, the number of scenarios that you want to
Yep.
be able to consider starts to balloon out of control very, very quickly.
Absolutely.
And this is when you have to look to technologies like AI to be able to kind of cull through all this and start to make sense of it. So I'm personally a little surprised at how low the adoption is, given that it's 2021, but I totally understand why so many of them are starting to think that this is a better answer and will help them going forward.
Yeah, exactly. I think to that point, not only are there's a large number of permutation and individual decisions that you can make across the entire user journey, but you're constantly trying to serve the best experience while the environment's changing. I mean, we were heavily impacted by COVID-19. You know, competitors are innovating, new offerings are coming into the market. So being able to adapt to those types of changes to serve the best experiences, one strategy would be to deploy AI in your program.
Yeah, and of course, this leads us to the fourth trend, which is security and compliance, which I know is near and dear to your heart, Sam.
Yeah, we hear this a lot, especially with all clients, but really financial institutions. And let's talk about, when you're bringing in AI and a provider, a vendor, making sure that it's stable, but also you don't sacrifice performance. There's no user friction in terms of serving the best experiences. And a lot of the financial institutions that we talk to are coming up with requirements of removing all third-party JavaScript snippets and third-party vendors delivering JavaScript to the website. And one of the financial institutions that we spoke with in the past, mainly what pushed them over the line to make a shift in their platform and kind of their requirements was back in 2018. There was a British Airways hack that compromised 380,000 transactions, basically redirecting users to a fake website. And they were fined 183 million British pounds. And so we're seeing big shifts in terms of updating platforms as well as deeper integrations. So when you're looking at finding a solution that complies with ITP, has less reliance on cookies, and also not delivering third-party JavaScript if you want to still have a client-side approach to your optimization. So making sure that you're able to host the variations that are in JavaScript, or third parties only delivering CSS or JSON documents, and you're able to do the rendering on your side. So you reduce the risk of potentially that snippet being hacked and redirecting users, like in the British Airways case. But also there are other strategies. You could do a deeper integration in your full stack, which obviously definitely helps with the security and compliance, and reducing the risk of opening up hacks, but also can impact your testing velocity. You'll need to make organizational changes around your personalization and optimization program. So those are some key considerations. Again, when you're looking at client-side providers, making sure that reliance on cookies and a way to render variations without needing the third party to actually deliver the JavaScript to create the renderings. John, you're muted.
Sorry, my apologies. Okay, we're coming to the end here. We'll do a quick wrap up. So really, you have to consider at this point, based on all these trends and where the market is moving and where consumer expectations are, how you're going to have an integrated and multi-screen strategy. I think there's just no delaying that. We've seen huge shifts in digital transformation investments, particularly in the financial services segment. And I think that that's a trend that will continue to accelerate, if anything. And then a big part of that is mobile and the shift to mobile. So that becoming one of the primary interfaces and having to really deliver the same level of experience that you would have on a desktop, and increasingly closing the gap between what you can do with a mobile device versus what you would seek to do in person in a branch. And then we hit on all the different demographics. Again, lots of statistics out there about the importance of focusing on different generations and also increasingly different cultural parts of a society. And that clearly, more than anything, demands a different journey. So now you have all these variations of, well, what device are they using? What services are they shopping for? What ethnicity are there? What's their preferred language? And what generation are they? And how do they prefer to interact with us? And again, it really just leads to very quickly a significant amount of variations and possibilities and things that you want to be able to play with, which is why AI plays such an important role. And I think you're seeing the increase in investment. And I think it's safe to say, based on our own dealings with customers in this space, that if you don't start to head in that direction, you're going to get left behind very, very quickly, because the level of experience that's going to be provided by people who are adopting this approach and then leveraging better tools like AI to realize their plans and their strategy is going to stand out in the market. And then the last point, because we know security is just such a thorny issue and such a source of concern, all of this means you now more than ever have to be able to leverage information that you have about your particular clients and prospects. And that really means making sure that you're leveraging technology that is using the more modern ways of implementing themselves, and at all costs, reduce potential threat vectors, remove the use of cookies and third-party JavaScripts, and luckily there's been a lot of advancements even in the last year, and there's some really interesting solutions out there. So we really encourage you to look into those and pick the right one that's going to deliver the flexibility, the agility, and the speed that you're looking for.
Thanks for joining us today, John, Sam, and to all those that tuned in. Check out Think CX episodes 1 through 9 at evolv.ai/events. If you have any recommended topics in the future you would like to hear, please reach out to us at hello@evolv.ai. Thanks again.